round of applause again.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
We had a kind of wild conversation backstage where some incredible storytelling about the making of this film. But I want to start, I've known Alice for many, many years, and about 6 years ago we sat down for coffee, and you told the story that you've met this Russian director and you're starting to work on a project. Could you talk about the beginning of the collaboration?
Yes.
And we'll go from there.
Yes, so the beginning of the collaboration, actually, we were not working on this film. Mm-hmm. We were working on a film we have since circled back to that for two people in Milwaukee was very practical at the time, a $40 million futuristic sci-fi film. And
that probably would be easier.
Yes, it would be easier. So, and then fast forward, we started working on this film. We'd been working together for about a year. And it took 5 years. That was 5 years ago.
Yeah, we thought it would take about a year and a half, something, reasonable amount of time for a smaller budget film made locally, but we didn't know what we were up against.
And the story has roots in your own story. In some ways.
In some ways, it's not an autobiography by no stretch of imagination. One of the many jobs I had in the 90s was driving a van like this. Not exactly this van, but for the same company where we borrowed the van from that is no longer in existence. Another company took over. So I carried those experiences with me. It was a 9 months long stint that was my backdoor to America, my own personal experience of learning about America, learning about Milwaukee, and I had those stories in me. And for a while, at some point, I wanted to do something based on that, but I felt a little bit disheartened on one of my trips back to Milwaukee that Milwaukee changed so much, and I was not interested in doing a period piece. So when Alice and I started talking about these stories, this experience, I remember, this is how I remember things. Alice was sitting right here, and she said, well, they don't have to be, set back there. It could be today, because not really that much changed. And this is how we started talking about it. And Alice had a star career in theater in Chicago, and we were working on the script, and we didn't know what we were getting ourselves into. And but we shook hands, and we decided to make it.
Well, for me, it was very interesting because I think we each come at it with a different. Star career is a little overblown, but anyone who's muscled through Chicago theater as we have knows that there's it's a hell of a thing to do. Uh-huh. It's wonderful and hard. But for me, it was really interesting to think about Milwaukee because I have long roots in Milwaukee. And that I didn't even know about when I moved there. And the city has gone through all these different permutations, and it went from being one of the most progressive cities in the country with socialist government, with everybody having really great jobs, to being the most segregated city in the country. It went from having the school system that was admired, revered, and emulated by cities around the country, to having a catastrophic school system in the city, and it's a place that's still fighting, and is reinventing itself. So many things have changed, so many things have improved, others haven't, and it's a very powerful place in this respect. And I think a lot of overlooked places in America are really powerful places. And, people tend to focus on the coasts, as we all know in Chicago.
Mm-hmm. But, yeah. And I understand the early version of the script took place over multiple days. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so I'm curious about how it evolved from that to the film everyone saw tonight. And I know that's a long, epic tale.
It's a long tale. We had it, how long was it, 8 days maybe? 8-day story?
It's a 7-8 day story. The first version was, I believe it was 2014 or maybe 15. It's hard to go back so far in time. We were very excited about that version. Ben Zeitlin, the director of Beasts of the Southern Wild, was one of the first readers. There's a friend.
He said it made him want to go out and shoot a movie.
It was
a fun,
there were a number other fans of the film who encouraged us to go and make it. And we started looking for money, and money wasn't coming fast and easy way. And in the process of looking for money, which took months and months and months at a time, we kept on getting back to the material and improving it, changing it. And there came a point when we had a bit of a false start, when we were almost about to make that version of the film, when we realized that we didn't have enough money still, but we had a couple of extras on the ground, and we made an almost semi-improvised film in 9 days. We wrote a script and got money and shot the film in a month and a half. It's a feature-length film that's in post-production right now. And I was busy editing that film with Give Me Liberty, the one you just saw, on the back burner, when we finally found a company in New York that was excited about the world, excited about Milwaukee, and they said, hey, we are getting on board, we want to make it with you, and we're going to take you to investors. And that's when Alice got back to the script that was, again, on the back burner. Took it for a spin, because, again, everything you work on, you create a bit of a distance, you go back to it, sometimes you see with more clarity, and you maybe, see it a little bit differently.
The thing that I realized is that people had responded to the worlds, and they were really engaged in the worlds of the film, and they had a hard time understanding how the worlds fit together. And so when you're thinking of things structurally, which is really important to do when you're writing something, is to think both in terms of it being character driven and having these experiences, but also structure is very, very critical. And it occurred to me that, and we talked about this, and a couple of other people had made recommendations, because you get comments and you always kind of pay attention to the comments, and the good comments, you've got to kind of hold them in your head. That if it were in a different temporal world, so for example, if it's one day and it's just one crazy day and all these worlds collide in one day, all of a sudden people can go, oh my God, I had a day like that. And that's what happened. It was like a click. It was a very simple turn in a way. And then also, there had been a protest in Milwaukee the year before. We didn't have any of the sort of political landscape of Milwaukee in the film previously. And it seemed relevant to put that in, and also as a way of sort of shifting stakes, and it helped the story become coherent. And it sort of fed into, we understood better why the day was so kind of crazy. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because it's not a huge turn, but it was something that made it fall into place in a very different way. Mm-hmm.
And then so you got investors involved in that version of the script.
Yes.
So what happened next?
Well, it put a lot of things in the right place, but it also opened a new door to a new set of problems.
New Pandora's
that
box.
we had no idea of. It was a Russian doll. We were taken to the investors, and we sat down with the investors at this lovely table in New York, and they told us that they haven't seen anything of such beauty in a while, in a very long time, and they compared it to another wonder that they were working on and with. It was very flattering, and they gave us full budget, and they said it's not contingent on stars. We're really happy with the fact that you want to do it with non-actors. The authenticity angle really interests us. We really love it. Just go and make it. You're blessed, Bless you. And off we went. And then what happened, Alice?
So certain things happened. So, again, it's this interface of art and practicality, and unfortunately, but neither was part of the partnership. So we started getting notes about the script that were that we knew weren't going to be helpful in terms of this film. So the note that we always use, because it really underscores the ridiculousness of it, was, can Dima please not pick up the chicken and take a bite on page 14? We're like, wow. If we're getting notes like that, we really have a a problem in terms of an understanding of what this movie is going to be like. And then certain very fundamental practical things like contracts, visas, and a budget had not been dealt with.
I remember my reaction actually to the
roach.
To the roach and the seal, yes. But no, I remember my reaction to the can demon not pick up the chicken and take a bite, because the main preoccupation was with the budget, and they were looking for ways to cut the budget, and we get all these notes, right? And I, in my puzzlement, befuddlement, I'm asking, well, how does it have to do with the budget cuts? And I was told, Kirill, everything does. Everything does. And yeah, so.
So in short, the visa for Maxime, who plays Dima, was not obtained. And
for the grandpa.
The grandpa was not obtained. And they couldn't get the budget under a number that turned out to be 4 times what we shot the film for. And they didn't have a contract in place. And what we found out later, we were on there are slots that distribution and production companies have for films, and we were the last small film they were doing.
They were shifting to another financing model from a private source to banking.
And it's like a whole different universe. And so we were out of time. And that was it.
And we got a fateful call at the end of September, early October, I believe it was early October 2017. We were having, I call it, Japanese style poor man's conference call with headphones when they told us we're afraid to tell you that they're no longer part of it. And it was utterly infuriating, and it was shocking. It was harder than climbing up the hill. It was basically being on top of the mountain and being hurled all the way down to, not even to square one, to -2, because all of a sudden we looked like imposters in the eyes of the community in Milwaukee, to all of the actors who had been waiting for us to be greenlit. We had this responsibility, and we were failing again. People began to lose their faith in us. Basically, they no longer believed us there was a project, and we looked at each other with Alice. I remember the moment Alice was still on the phone with them, and this is, I to this day claim that this is definitely one of the most important moments in my life, just personal, professional, whatever, and definitely the most important moment in the life of the making of this film, because it was the ultimate test, because we had all reasons to walk away and say goodbye to each other, to the project, and people would have understood, I think, business people would have understood, but a few things for sure, we would have never been able to look each other in the eye. We would be embarrassed for the rest of our lives. We would be spiritually bankrupt. And I think that absolutely, 100%, we would have given up. And our families would be embarrassed of us, actually, after 2.5 years of promises and hard work. I mean, we wasted time. And so we looked at each other, we knew we were moving forward. I mean, that's the practical way, is not to walk away, but to move forward. How are we going to do it? We're going to do it.
I also think, and this is like to film students and people studying film in here, you go through yellow lights, when you're working with people, and you sort of, sometimes you feel like, we felt like, we finally have the money, we've just got to grin and bear it. And we were going through yellow lights we shouldn't have gone through in retrospect.
It's important to pay attention.
Yes.
Yeah. And be honest with yourself.
And so what happened is we ended up in a worse place than we would have been had we not done that, because before we were like on the ascent, and then all of a sudden we're here, we'd arrived, and then we were like at the bottom of the hill again. And we were told by industry people we would never make the movie, that it was dead. We
were dead for the industry. We would never recover from this blow.
So, yeah, I mean, and so then, when we decided to make it, we had to make it in this very crazy way.
The film was shot for the amount less than the overhead of the budget that our ill-fitting partners made for the film. Not because we're such incredible people, because we had to.
We had no choice.
and you become creative not only with the material and the scenes, but you become creative with the budget and how you find money and how you spend it. And you assemble a team, a family of people who love the film, who want to be on the set and do it for the love of filmmaking. They do get paid, but maybe not as much as they would be getting paid on a much bigger budget film that they do because they have to. So we were blessed with pretty much with everyone on the set. Just they thanks to them, we were able to pull it off.
Well, they believed in it. We had a great DP who came in.
Wyatt Garfield.
Our production designer, Bart Mangrum. Our first AD, Tim Farrell, who is from Chicago.
So very important to choose your family, especially while you're in school, you're working with each other. This is the perfect ground to test each other, how you work with each other and form families. We have a great example of Martin Scorsese and Thelma Schumacher. They've been working since their school years as editor-director, and it's incredible. It's a gift. And we had an incredible family of people. And we
hired a lot of local crew who came out of UWM Film School. And so a lot of our, and in fact, we had one young woman who came in, and when we talked to people, we said, look, you know, obviously we need something from you, but you need to get something out of this as well. And I asked her what she really wanted to do. She came in to interview to be key PA. She said, well, I really want to work in the art department. And we had a brilliant production designer coming in, a guy who works with Harmony Korine, who has done
Jack White.
All of Jack White's music videos, who did Stoker, very accomplished guy. And we didn't have the money for him to bring his assistant. And I thought, well, maybe, you know, this will work. They had a great time working together. They had a phenomenal, you know, working partnership. And she ended up with a prop master and assistant production designer credit on the film, which is really fantastic. And now that's what she does. So there were a lot of stories like that, you know, which is great, because you want everyone who's part of something to walk away and feel really good about it.
I'm so excited by how you cast the film and the choice to work with non-actors, some Russian actors. What was behind that decision, and what was the process of assembling that family, that cast that does feel like a family after you experience the film? You know, normally you send a sort of breakdown to a casting director. We need this kind of person, and they send you pictures. But what was it's such a unique process, and I'm very curious if you could talk us through some of the decisions and some of the challenges you faced choosing to cast the film that way. I
had an incredible experience with my first feature in a small Brazilian village, fishing village, where I was writing the film for people in that village, particular place, not actors, and I knew that because of the nature of what they do, there would be no way to train actors to do what I needed them to do, which is to walk the way they walk and dive, and their bodies are a product of years and years of the particular kind of job that they do out there in the open waters. And an incredibly positive experience. I come from School of Neorealism just by what I admire in film. Among other things, I mean, it doesn't mean that I only admire work of non-actors, but for this film, it was clear to me from the get-go that it should be non-actors. I didn't know how difficult it would make our life to make the film, to get it financed. Nobody wanted to finance the film with non-actors, and in the end, we had a very hard time distributing the film. Because there were no star power. But at the time it felt very right. We embraced this approach. We wanted to make it feel authentic, and we also wanted to make it locally. We did not compromise. The first thing with cast was the location. We had many attempts to take this film somewhere else, and it sounded sensible, but we committed to Milwaukee, and that was the first thing. It started with the location, and then we wanted to work for creative reasons and for reasons of economics with as much local talent as possible. We had so much fun writing the script, and we came up with this incredible 4 characters. We looked at each other as we often do. After the script, they're like, okay, we're having a lot of fun, but how on earth we're going to find these 4 incredible characters? And of course, you've just seen the film. It's Lolo. It's larger than life, a thug with a heart of gold, Dima. It's this incredible, intense young man with interesting history and this split personality background of Russian American, and who would be the 4th artist?
I think it really was Grandpa.
Grandpa, yeah.
So we went through, when the script caught fire, so to speak, all of a sudden we had actors reaching out through their representatives.
Lolo was the first, even before it caught.
Yeah, before it caught fire, we had attached Lolo, and we attached Lolo through a really wonderful casting director who's at the Goodman Theater. And they had done a play with deaf actors. And so they had worked with a casting agency that works with people who have disabilities in New York, and they got us to somebody in LA who represented Lolo. And so Lolo's like the first person we meet, and she's so astonishing, and we knew. There was no question.
What are the odds, right? You have this character, it's like, we're probably never going to find exactly that.
Right. She was there like immediately. And then we had a terrible time finding Dima, and it was really, the partners, the famous partners, kept proposing people, and Kirill's like, what will I do with this face?
Well, with Dima, because we had a specific description, we had very specific idea with each character, and with Dima it was very specific. We knew who he was representing.
Heart of gold.
A boxer with a story, Eastern European, broken nose, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
It was
and so
Dima.
We would get a stack of photos from New York, from agencies, through casting directors, just a bunch of metrosexuals with a clearly, that smell like very expensive gyms, very well built and very well fed, and with this really nicely groomed with a perfectly trimmed stubble. It's like they're fine. They're perhaps virile in some other world, but in another world we need a charismatic Eastern European, this charmer, this hoodlum, this a street guy, street person, street smarts. And that's when we turned to our friend in Russia, a casting director with whom I worked many years before, and that's one of the best things that came out of that experience. And she spent 2 years
just like
no pay, just sending us videos and photos of different
people in England, Russia, Georgia. I mean, she was amazing.
Yeah, she was amazing.
And she found Max. And again, it was the same thing. We saw him and we're like, oh, it's Dima. And then Chris was turned out to be the almost impossible person to cast.
For some reason. I made a mistake with the actor when I thought that he's never seen, maybe we'll find somebody rough around the edges, kind of raw, in the rough, but a trained actor.
Well, who we were getting pressure because he was the lead to cast an actor, which is what happens. And we, because the script was this hot script, we talked to basically every actor between the age of 20 and 30 something. We had a long, Shia LaBeouf and I now have we see each other at festivals, and we're like, we've made a handshake deal to do a film together, because he was the guy we were really thinking would be interesting. He was in Greenland for a month off media, so we were only talking to his manager. We Skyped with every guy in Dunkirk, which was comedy. We had this endless array of really wonderful actors, but here it's against this backdrop of we know we have Lolo cast, we have Dima Maxime, who was in fact a boxer, and then we're looking at all these English actors who have nothing to do with the Russian immigrant world, who have never lived in America, let alone, as I thought about later, driven on the right side of the road, which would have been an absolute nightmare. And so at that point, the production group we were with went to Jen Venditti, who's a brilliant, the finance partners, went to Jen Venditti, who's a brilliant casting director in New York City, who cast American Honey, Uncut Gems,
White Boy Rick, Good Time, yeah.
And she started street casting. Yeah. And Chris was found buying a cake. They were like, they'd been doing it. We were on this crazy timeline trying to get everything in place. And
It was before we lost
before we lost the deal.
the deal, yeah.
And he was in Brighton Beach buying a cake in a bakery, and they hear him speak English. They're like, well, there's half of it. He speaks English, but he probably doesn't speak Russian. And then he goes in and he orders the cake in Russian, and they're like, it's him. And his family, and he's now in LA. He's got wonderful roles. Recently, he's going to be an actor. His family was convinced that it was a porn. They're like, it's not real. It couldn't possibly be real. This never happens, you know? So we had a lot of persuading to do with him.
The cake was for the 25th anniversary of his grandfather's being in America. It's like a poster.
And he lived with his
was
grandpa.
At the end, it was
and
at
Chris
the
is an electrician. So he was working as an electrician at the time.
He's not an actor. No training as an actor. No experience acting either on stage or in front of the camera. And ideally, I felt I needed a couple of months with him breaking in Milwaukee, working and living and wearing the clothes that he would be wearing and working with him on the role. But in the end, again, when everything collapsed, we ended up having only 8 days with him on the ground, of which he drove for 8 days. He worked for that company, learning the ropes of how to work with people with disabilities to make them feel safe and everything. And I literally had 1 hour, well, maybe an hour and a half with him in a coffee shop to bring down the character, to talk to the character. And I could see it on his face. It's like, this is just not enough. But, you know, I mean, sorry, pal. I mean, that's the deal we have. And
he's about to be in the new Exorcist.
He's about to
to
be in the same shot with Guy Pearce, and they talk with each other. They're on the phone, and he's going to get some tips from the star of Leviathan, if you know of this film, and Guy Pearce. I really hope they become friends, and maybe he gets some roles that way. Yeah. And you know, the amazing thing was just happened. We didn't share that in the Film Independent Award. We're talking about the enormous space with 4,000 people in it, and Adam Sandler strolls in, and the first stop he makes is Lolo. He talks to her, so we're sitting there as proud parents watching them communicate. He clearly did his homework. He's talking to her, and they hug each other, and then he moves on to Chris. They spend 20 minutes talking, and his peers, famous people, stars, come over to him, tap him on the shoulder, he greets him, and goes back to Chris. They clearly connect. Unbelievable. It was beautiful. Such an incredible human being. Yeah. So he came over to our table to congratulate us on the Jan Cassavetes Award. And when Lolo, heartbreakingly, didn't get it, he came over to her to toast her, to support her. An incredible human being. Just really, really sweet, real man. Yeah.
But we also did a lot of casting in the inner city in Milwaukee.
Almost 3 years.
Yeah, and we had really interesting experiences because Milwaukee is so segregated. We had incredible support from a woman named Josephine Hill, who runs the Wisconsin African American Women's Center. And somehow she's brilliant, wonderful human being.
A community leader.
Real work in the city that isn't recognized enough. Mm-hmm. And she said, you know, these people are really doing something. And there was a point where we had open casting and people were coming in and we had kind of a slow day, and this guy comes in and he sits down, and one of our first questions was, you know, how did you hear about us? And he goes, look, I was just delivering a package, and Miss Josephine said, get in there. They don't have enough people to
get your butt in there.
It was like the UPS guy, you know? But
we amassed a database of non-actors based in Milwaukee, and people of various talents, various abilities and interests, and some of them are insanely gifted. Mm-hmm. Like the opera singer in the film, Lindsay Willicombe. It's her first role actually in the second film, and
she came in on an open call, and we said, "Is there anything you can do?" And she said,
"Can you do anything?" Yes, I can sing.
So much fun.
Why are you getting up? That's how I sing.
And then you had 23 days to shoot the film. How did you do that?
I
mean, given all the obstacles, so you have non-actors, you have this tiny budget, you're doing scenes all throughout the city. driving in this van that is a real van that's falling apart.
Van with no heating and diesel fumes.
That would break down.
And dealing with these older folks, dealing with folks with disabilities.
Yes, and
that's you almost set yourself up for an impossible
I think there was so much energy going forward. This is part of it. There was this extraordinary, like we had this incredible desire to make the film. Our DP had been on board and was like, we've got to make it. Our AD had the same kind of like, and I think, I don't think anything could have stopped us. I think it was just that at the end of the day, like we were not going to not get the film.
To illustrate your point further, it would take 1 hour to get everyone on the van. And that's 1 hour of shooting. You're losing 1 hour. Then 1 hour to get everyone off the van. And the elderly Russian people, they were in pain constantly. Half of them are cancer survivors. And they're in pain mostly sitting. So when they're strapped in the van for 6 hours at a time, they're in excruciating pain. And so it was difficult. It wouldn't be easy to do a second take really quickly because it's really hard to get people back in that position.
Or necessarily a second take.
Oh, not necessarily.
We'd be like, okay, we have to move on. Like,
we had schedule. Mm-hmm. We did have a script. We had a plan. Without a plan, we wouldn't be able to accomplish anything. We had a schedule. We had actually a Chicago-based first AD, Tim Farrell, incredible guy, friend, who did this very tough schedule, juggling so many pieces.
Brilliant at scheduling.
And again, grandfather came on board day before shooting because we were expecting an actor to come in, and he had a heart surgery. So the day we realized he's not coming, we announced that you're going to do it. It's like, okay.
In fact, there's one little clip that no one really notices where Grandpa is in the choir, in the foyer, because he was just in the choir, and all of a sudden we're like, uh-oh, Grandpa's upstairs catching the chicken on fire.
Well, and so just for there is a possible sequel there, a different genre.
Doppelganger Grandpa.
Exactly. But this is all to say that Tim had to juggle all these elements and constantly move pieces around, which meant that he would stay, everybody would go home at 11 p.m. Or, 10 p.m., and Tim would stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning, figuring out the schedule to make sure everybody has it at 5 o'clock in the morning. And so we get on the set, and we know what we need to get done, accomplish. And most of things, I didn't have the luxury of working with people long periods at a time, so we would have 30 minutes, 1 hour, 1 hour and a half. Obviously, it's taken away from the shoot, sadly, but that's the reality. And then we go for it. We do one take, and most of the time, maybe the second or third rehearsal would be filmed because the DP's antsy for good reason because we're running out of time. And why don't we feel as we figuring things out, and sometimes really great things would get filmed. And so you're on schedule, and we know, and there's a lot of pressure, and you just keep on knocking things out as well as let's face it, as well as we can.
Well, and we had the additional problem of it's one day, right? And we didn't shoot the film consecutively.
So continuity, yeah.
So continuity. Like all of a sudden we're like, oh my God, this is supposed to be in the morning or this is supposed to be in the evening. You just had this hell of trying to juggle the timeline of the day, which just was a nightmare unto itself.
It was a first role ever for Lolo, debut. Her first scene, the first scene she did. The day after her arrival in Milwaukee for the first time, the coldest thing she ever experienced in her life was the throwdown fight in the van when the two yell at each other. That was the first scene she did, and she killed it. She killed it. And what shocked me, throughout the shoot is that she would always be prepared, incredibly well rehearsed, take after take, like a complete soldier. And Chris, the driver, the main character, first time ever. Not to mention all the non-actors and all the elderly people and people with disabilities, of course. all of them really didn't know what to expect from the set. They didn't have the experience of being on the set. But what they did, they really felt this intensity that we all went through because we were running. We did not want to fail our investors. We did not want to make a terrible film or be in a situation where we can't make it. Mm-hmm. So that intensity was real. We were in a war, and they felt that intensity. They felt it, and I think ultimately it brought the best out of them. They were not in a position to be scandalous or grumpy. They felt something really important is happening. I don't know what it is,
well, also,
but we better deliver.
The choir, former Soviet citizens from different republics.
Right.
And they have a total Soviet ethos, right? So they were in there and they were going to do it.
They're soldiers,
they were going to do it well, and they were going to suffer a little bit and complain a little bit, but
they would complain, but they would always come back.
They would always come through, which was remarkable.
It's like they regretted committing to it,
they totally
but they couldn't bail out of it because
it
would just betray their principles. And the headmaster of the choir, she had a double lung pneumonia in the middle of the shoot. She was diagnosed.
Got it during the cemetery. It was actually very cold.
The coldest thing was the van because they're not moving.
No, I know.
And it would just fill up. She had it.
Yeah,
it was, and she refused to stop the shoot. She said, nobody's getting off the van. We're getting it done. We've seen it through.
The nights we shot all night shoots for the protest scene, which was really fascinating because we shot in a very tough part of Milwaukee, and we had to have police presence. We shot at a community center and had incredible people there helping us out. And the police who came, 2 of them had worked the actual riots in Milwaukee. And so they're like engaging. They're like, oh, no, this isn't what happened. We're like, oh, okay, And we ended up with Black community leaders and white Milwaukee cops sitting down over soup at like 3 a.m. talking about how to make the city a better place, which never happens. People go to great lengths to try to make that happen. We were like watching this thinking, well, it's not so hard, actually. It's like
toward the end of how it was possible. This is something I learned with our first one, that false start. You look at what do you have to accomplish, and you look at the resources, and you see nothing but obstacles, and you realize if you start fighting these obstacles, you'll lose. There comes a way, and the same happened, similar on a grander scale, happened with Give Me Liberty. And I think this is the greatest takeaway just for life, no matter what people do, but I think especially in filmmaking. It's how you turn your obstacles into your advantages. Because if you fight them, you lose. There's too many. You don't have the resources to fight them. But almost everything what's good on screen there came out of an obstacle, of a hurdle.
Could you give a specific example from the film that where that lesson?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, I mean,
or a scene or a particular moment in the film.
Chris being like constantly under stress and being late. I mean, we were. I mean, that's a great example of just like he was actually stressed about the timeline and getting places and driving. I mean, truly, he was.
That was not a choice, I think. But I'll tell you about a choice. A choice was, for instance, we had no money for lights.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And when you deal with so how many people were at the protest scene, in your opinion, based on your experience of watching the film? Well, guys, you're too smart. You're too smart. You know where the question is coming from, but not that little. No. We were hoping for about 500. We got about 50, and at the worst point, we had about 12, including the crew members. And but what we did with Wyatt. The objective was to do it black and white, but the important thing was, the idea was we couldn't find the right location, and we found one location that was really good and close to that, but we didn't want to show it. And we didn't have a lot of lights. So I wanted to have the sensation of them getting off this thing and be blinded by the light, which means you, the audience members, are going to be blinded by the light. You're not, as a result of that, going to see a lot. And it's also a way to use few lights to its maximum capacity. And that was our, basically, saving grace. We could be choosing that aesthetics. And by choosing, we could actually use as few lights as we could. Something similar happened with the with the disco party when we ended up not having enough lights, and we ended up projecting the lights onto the wall to create, we went for a certain particular effect and worked with shadows more.
And are these decisions being made on the fly, or
This,
the day before?
no. Disco was on the fly. The protest was prepared.
When we
was prepared.
Once we'd located the location, because we had another location in mind, and we didn't get approval to shoot it at that location. So there was this ongoing, normally you would have maybe 2 months of prep, where everything would be locked. You'd have all your permits in place, and we had about 2 weeks tops. So we were actually, as we shot, we were still waiting for permits, and we'd find out, okay, we have this whole setup, we figured it out, we know exactly where we're gonna do, for example, a car accident. We knew that whole thing, and then we didn't get the permit. So we scrambled, we got a permit in another place, and then we had to reconfigure everything. So there was this constant, and like the guy who was supposed to be in the script Cadillac Man who gets in the car accident, he had a funeral. And he called and he said, I'm so sorry. And we couldn't change the date that we were doing that because it was the only day we had the permit, and the process would take another 3. So there was we couldn't change it. And the guy who played him came out of his, what was his, he was in a meeting for the, what is it, the group he's with, Michael, the guy who played Cadillac Man.
Masons.
Masons.
Yeah, Freemasons. Yeah. The guy, he turned it down.
His thing, and we're like, do you want to be in a movie?
Yeah, sure. And he goes, sure. And the choice of clothes was his, and it was perfect.
The hat.
Another actually great example of embracing the difficulties. We couldn't get the rights to those 2 Russian songs after we played the movie at Sundance, and so 2 months before Cannes, we had to re-record 2 scenes completely with 50+ characters, completely, and the scenes were very tough. The diabetic fit on the van, and also when the whole choir is stalking Vic, blackmailing him into helping them. So we have multiple characters, a choir of characters. There is a polyphony of things. There's singing. There's so many layers, and we re-recorded the whole thing, and it turned out to be much better. It just sounded better, fuller, clearer, and just a better film.
Well, we also have an
so
angelic sound mixer named Julian Perez, who happens to live in Paris and is a saint.
But
Well,
you
let's
said
take a pause a second. We're
Yeah.
going to start the Q&A in about
Yep.
5 minutes.
Great.
And so just want to let folks know there are mics on either end here if you want to
Fantastic.
line up over there. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, so I mean, you also, like your post-production team matters a great deal, because we had to go through and we did a second cut. And we had a team who was, very much in the box. They let us come back.
They would go an extra mile, and when you have
Absolutely.
French people working for you on Sunday, something
You know,
special
you're
is
like-
happening. Yeah. Because it never happens. Toward that end, by the way, speaking of sound, that Alice talked about, Julian Perez, who said my job was very easy because all I have to do is bring certain things up and bring certain things down, because we had up to 12 channels running. No matter how little money you have, never save your money on a sound person.
Yeah, our on-set sound person is a guy named Jeremy Maza, and he is incredible. He also, he was very, very calm the whole time. He was, I think, the calmest person.
And he
on
didn't
set.
care about lunch. The
No.
only person who didn't care about
Yeah,
lunch.
he was
Also very important.
So focused on making sure he got his sound. And during the talent show, I remember there was a point he would take his headphones off and turn to me and say, "Another transcendent moment." So he really was in that mode. And a sound person, as you all know, is
It just a lot of people say that camera is everything. Camera is, of course, is very important,
Yes.
but it's the sound. That's how you check the quality of film. Because the thing about sound, if sound is great, nobody says anything. If sound is bad, everybody complains. Somehow our ears are so sensitive. If there's something off with the sound, it's just not going to fly. It's not going to fly. And in our case, we wouldn't be able to re-record anything, because this is once in a lifetime kind of opportunities. Many people geographically were in different places. We would never be able to bring them back. And to repeat this moment in time, no way.
so.
And then you complete the film, and suddenly it's at Sundance, it gets to Cannes. So going from the high of, having investors, and then the low of having nothing and starting again from scratch. Talk about the aftermath of the film a little bit.
So we've learned a lot about the world of independent film, particularly in the new era of big platforms and sort of the new smaller studios. The studio system has completely changed. Groups like Amazon and Netflix and now Apple have reconfigured how independent film is distributed. We were the only film in our section of Sundance to get distribution. Theatrical distribution. So we had international sales and French distribution before Sundance. And then we didn't get a deal for US distribution out of Sundance, which was devastating because we were this touted, hyped film, and then there was nothing. So that was when we went back to the drawing board. We did another, we cut 16 minutes off the film. We went back and did some more post-production. We went to Cannes. We had the longest standing ovation of the Cannes Film Festival, which was kind of crazy. It was this, amazing reception. The French loved the film. Music Box of Chicago got on board to distribute. And they did a really beautiful job distributing the film. So it went all over the country. But it's one of the things that's happened is, of course, we all know people don't go to the theater. People watch movies at home. And the new threshold for theatrical distribution by anyone is like, what would make this film something that will bring people out of their living rooms? And it's a very high bar. I mean, there's a shifting world of theatrical distribution, which makes it tricky if you don't start out with a deal with a platform, because then you're kind of trying to figure out, well, can I get distribution? How can I jump to a platform without a pre-existing platform deal? It's why you see things like Downton Abbey, the movie, with people coming to dress up. They're trying to eventize, I think, I hate it when people think, verbs out of.
Okay, well, shall we open it up to audience members who have questions?
As long as they don't Uberize.
Uberize.
Just Uber.
Hi, I'm Leah. I'm a screenwriting grad student here. And I wanted to ask you about some of the techniques that you used that were really interesting, like when you shifted to black and white and the moments where you had voiceover happening over actions that didn't match up with them speaking, and it was really interesting and really beautiful. And I just wanted to know your process behind why you wanted to include that and how you shot that.
I wanted the protest to be black and white, and I'm glad that we succeeded doing it this way. I wanted to be very visceral, devoid of information, unnecessary information, because color, or a lot of color, is information, and it is not political. It's not a comment. It's a solution for this particular scene and for this particular experience. It was important to focus on 4 people in a bigger crowd and to connect them in that crowd during this heated moment in that city. As far as manipulating sound and image, the idea was to show what he's thinking of, what his mind is on, and you manipulate sound toward that effect. And it's just a technique, and it felt right. And he's getting fired, but he's thinking of this young woman with whom he connected. Then we get out of it by this, I think, his boss's voice, Vic, he calls him. He gets him out of his dream state, pushes the keys. He's back to reality. That's and throughout the film, you can see how the sound progressively prelapse The sound from the following scene starts at the tail of the preceding scene, and Vikas continues playing catch-up throughout the film. He's always late.
The disco scene in particular is an interesting one because we went through variations of it. We looked at it in black and white. We had it in color. We worked with a guy named Elliot Coca, who's a colorist in Paris, who's really an artist. He's really very gifted guy who does work with Gaspard Noé and Claire Denis, and Ellie started playing with it. And started playing with this idea of these flashes of color, and it was this kind of extraordinary thing. You know, he's, I think he was seeing it in a really interesting way. You're gonna, what do you?
No, this story was a little bit different, but it's okay. But it's okay.
Say that.
But it's okay. But it's okay. No, Ali is incredible.
He's incredible.
Aside from everything, and he works with Claire Denis and Gaspard Noé. And we were truly blessed to have him for not that many days. We couldn't afford him for more, but he works so. I mean, he's good, but he is fast, and not a lot of people. I mean, it's hard to do it well and fast because things take time. Because I don't know how it's done technically because I don't know how to work these machines. But there's this term, he goes deep. So he goes deep into the color and he manipulates, and because it's digitally manipulated image, he really knows. He uses all these newest techniques to go to the very foundation, to the very basis of the color and find the right tonality.
And he is an artist.
I wanted to do that scene black and white, but it didn't work. It's basically, sometimes it didn't work.
And it wasn't right in
And
color
everybody
either.
was telling me that it doesn't work, and I didn't want to, I agree with that. I was annoyed by that, but it didn't work quite. There's something wasn't right about it. And so we arrive at the studio, and they changed it all to color. And that didn't work either. It was just not right. All of a sudden it became banal. But there is something really particularly special about it. And that's when the idea surfaced by how about we sneak in some black and white. Mm-hmm. Black and white, so unbeknownst to almost audience members, so that it's not aestheticized, because that's the last thing you want to do is aestheticize something that is authentic and something that is real. Not to impose a voice upon it, but rather honor the experience in a unique way, as it is. And I think we found, and Ellie got very excited about the whole process. He said, I had never done anything like that before. And it was amazing because we had so little time and so little money. And yet that allowed him to actually experience something that he didn't experience in a much bigger budget films. And when Julien Perez, our mixer, saw that new rendition of the scene, because he works with image, he got really emotional. He got teary. I mean, he teared up.
Okay, have another question?
Hi, I'm Sam. I'm an undergrad majoring in film editing, and I just have a quick question about you both coming out of this film and this experience. It seems quite stressful, and I wanted to know what the biggest moment of change was for you both as creators, working with all of these people who haven't had the experience within the film industry making this movie. Does that make sense?
Wow.
What was the most important
the biggest moment of change for you as a person making this film with all of these people who have never had this experience before?
Wow.
Well, I have an answer.
Okay, you go
have
first.
An answer?
You go first.
Well, to me, making every film, or I haven't made that many, but it was, I thank God for the second chance to make my first film. It felt like the first film ever made. I never made a film like this, directed a film like this. I never, period, even if we had all the money in the world and all the time in the world, this is for the first time. So I have this anxiety, of course. But also we were put in very unusual circumstances that I don't want to ever repeat again, but they may. But I don't want to. No one in their right mind will want this kind of circumstances, plans for these kind of circumstances. So it was a unique experience, truly. So for me, the most important moment was that moment when we moved on and moved forward, when we got that fateful call, when we lost everything. You know, after not having anything, climbing, we finally had everything and we lost it. That was the most important learning experience, I would say, personally, as a human. Because ultimately, whoever came up with that spirited word, you know, knew what they were talking about. Everything we do in life is the work of spirit. We work on ourselves. We are going through this journey, spiritual journey, and there's no pathos to it. It's just mundane, rather. We are learning, and we're working on our spirit. I think in terms of, I'll speak for myself, spiritually speaking, that was the most important moment. We didn't walk away from it. And I think whatever energy there is out there, that was the moment we got blessed. And everyone else involved, of course. And that was the energy that we brought to the process of the filming it, which clashed with the reality. And out of this clash, there was born very particular energy that this film, I think, is unique for, I would say.
I would say just quickly that for me I was not the producer of this film when we started. I'm a playwright, I'm a writer, and I didn't intend to actually produce a movie. That was, had not been in my sort of constellation of things I wanted to do. And I ended up producing this movie, and certain things in my background made that very possible. I'm a lawyer, so there are certain kinds of things I can do that are really useful for producing a film. I think for me there were two moments, one of which was our DP. I was in New York actually workshopping a play a month before we shot the film. And I met our DP at MoMA, and we saw Leviathan, paradoxically. And he turned to me as the lights were going down and he said, it's now or never. It's winter, And I had been looking for the producer to substitute for the producers we lost who were not the right partners for this film. And I realized that the producer was me. And that was completely terrible. Then the lights went down and I'm watching Leviathan thinking, oh my God, this is terrible. And then, so the sort of bookend moment was when we wrapped the film. We've gone through a lot of really wonderful, miraculous, exciting, happy moments since we made the movie. But for me, the most gratifying and also the most profound relief was when we actually wrapped principal photography. And I thought, oh my God, we actually made the movie. It just felt like such an incredible gift, a miracle after what we went through. So.
Little did you know, because we wrapped it just a few weeks ago. We kept them working.
Time for one more question.
Hi, how are you? I came a little late, but right away, the thing that kind of caught my attention was one, like the sound and like the way the camera lenses would change from like a sort of like what seemed like a very clear like image to like something that almost looked like vinyl-y and like old school. And I kind of liked that. And then the colors and like the conversations that would happen. And I kind of just went for like this almost like emotional roller coaster, just watching everything unfold and like what each like character in the movie was going through, and like I kind of just felt like every little emotion, and like you were mentioning before, like you guys were going through that whole struggle of like coming up with this and making this come to fruition. And like I just someone who myself, I really want to learn how to make films one day, and like I kind of just study and like see like everything involved from the characters to things behind the scene. I just want to know like maybe like what's like an advice for someone who's kind of like trying to come up with something but really can't, like, I guess, I don't know, maybe believe in themselves, and like all these things that kind of affect, your artistic directive, like mindset from being freed, I guess. I don't know. It's like a really abstract question, but.
If you want a freedom, I'm not sure if filmmaking is the right area of activities.
Look, I would say first, one of the most important things and it's one of the hardest things to do. And I hate the word as an artist, but filmmakers, playwrights, people who are doing this, they're artists, is to believe in yourself and to hold fast to that belief. And it's very difficult, and it's the most important thing. And then, you know, to also work hard and to push forward. You know, not to kind of, we always talk about like this idea of wearing blinders. You know, like you don't look to the left, don't look to the right. Just stay focused, keep your vision, and do it. And it's hard, and I won't say it's not hard. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's almost an answer in your question. I think we all know this. We talk differently about the same thing. Because we're the same, precisely because we're different, kind of like the movie. The characters in the film, there's this underlying humanity. I always say, at some point I became aware that if I stopped directing or trying to do whatever I'm doing, no one will notice really, because no one should. The life is big and people are busy. If my mom maybe, but other than that, really. So if you stop doing whatever you're doing, I don't think a lot of people will notice. I don't think anyone will notice. If you want to do this, then it'll happen. And this is, and you know, and that's the bottom line. If you, only you, and once it's made, people will see it, of course. But so it all starts with you, and you know, and look no further.
And watch a lot of great movies.
I think so. I think that's the problem. People are trying to reinvent the wheel today, and oftentimes, you know, younger generation could be, and you talk to people, and the references are missing. It's like, you know, we just started making movies last year. No, I mean the greatest things were made, you know, before film schools. It's true, you know, the greatest filmmakers, and you know, like silent pictures, by the way, where things could be universally communicated through motion, through montage, or through gesture, etc. Sound made it richer, of course, you know, more layered, but also was a little bit alienating because all of a sudden it became nation-state filmmaking. So, but go back, because people have been making incredible films in the 20th century, and I don't think better things will be made, but different, yes, possible.
Well, the uniqueness of this film, what's so striking about it to me, is that it seems to stem directly from the uniqueness of this journey that you took in making it.
A great comment.
Thank you for making such a beautiful film, and I wish you great luck in the next endeavors. And thank you for being here at DePaul.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this opportunity. It's
Thank you.
really.
Yeah.